You will probably not have heard of Ken Higgs. But look at this for a seam bowler's ass. You could eat a 3-course meal on this and still produce 28 overs of probing length the following day. And that is what Higgs did day after day. And because he was so good at it, they also let him play test match cricket. When he did play in those, he took 71 wickets at 20.74. In New Zealand, he played 3 matches and averaged 9.74. In the UK, it was around 23, which was also his first-class mark. Ken Higgs was a fantastic cricketer. His career also spanned a very long time. 10,340 days, or 28 years, 3 months, and 21 days. He started in 1958, and he finished his first-class career in 1986. However, he did retire in 1970 before coming back a couple of years later with Leicestershire before retiring again in the early 80s. But in 1986, he played 2 first-class matches. That's because he was the Leicestershire bowling coach at that time, and they were short of players, so he made a comeback to help them out. In his first game back, he came on second change, and he only went and took a 5-wicket haul against Yorkshire. In that same attack was Philip de Freitas. The point is that he's no ordinary bowler. He was a great in tests when he got a chance, and he took a fifer at the age of 49 in first-class cricket. And you might be justified in wondering why I've spent all this time speaking to you about the great Ken Higgs. And it's not just because of the berserk backside he had, or even the weird curved run-up he had on the way in. It's what Ken Higgs represents. England medium-fast seam bowling imperfection. Yet in 1968, this beast of a bowler would play his final test. Why? Because at any one time, England has a bucket load of Ken Higgs around for them to use. You are what your conditions dictate in tests, and English cricket produces a lot of line and length wobblers because of, all of this wet stuff. You see them playing club cricket on village greens or right throughout the lower levels of English professional cricket, jogging in, placing it on a line, nipping it both ways. Batting in English cricket is overcoming their nagging, metronomic, boring existence. There is no doubt that England is the home of the medium-fast seamers. And that is what we have in this test. England could have chosen Mark Wood for this match, especially perhaps if they knew just how dire this surface would be. Getting his pace on this wicket would have been interesting, especially with his lower trajectory. But Wood has struggled on good batting decks at Edgbaston before, and he's also not been that good in England. Chances are that England thought this was their best bowling attack, and with Jofra Archer's injuries, it would be kind of hard to argue that it is. Jimmy Anderson is obviously Ken Higgs, but God-tier mode. Higgs was seen as someone who couldn't tour that much after a couple of bad tests in Australia. Anderson's early extra speed meant that he had more chances to play all surface and around the world and become the bowler that he is now. But as great as Anderson has been, he's obviously slowed down quite a bit over the last few years. And his use on wickets without assistance has always been a little bit less. He would be a much better bowler if you matched him with Jofra Archer, Pat Cummins or Kikisa Rabada. But England has none of those 3 available to them, meaning that they're forced to take in their second best bowler. If you talk to cricket hipster nerds, they will say that is Ollie Robertson. The recent Jim Bunny is an incredible, tall, skillful and accurate package. Despite his age compared to Anderson, he's still obviously quite a bit slower. And he's another skill bowler. He needs some existence from the surface. His plan B compared to some other bowlers in Test cricket is fairly limited. But if you're a big fan of big bags of wickets, then Stuart Broad might be your second best bowler for England right now. And he's tall and skillful as well. In fact, he's basically a slightly faster and marginally less accurate version of Robinson. They're really similar, which means right at the moment, if England go in with their 3 best seam bowlers, it's a glut of these right-arm, medium-faced, skill-based seamers, 2 of which happen to be a little bit tall as well. And if you look at the best bowlers of all time, obviously Anderson and Broad are number 1 and 2. And at number 3 is Ian Botham, who is another skill-based bowler. But after that, you will see that England have made quicker bowlers. Bob Willis was at least fast-medium for most of his career, and for a good period of it, he was fast as well. He certainly wasn't someone who liked to bowl within himself, he liked to use that pace. Behind him is fiery Fred Truman. I think his name does some of the work there, but he was also one of the early prototypes of what modern fast bowling would become. There are a couple of spinners here that we can obviously happily overlook before we get to a bunch of skill guys. Brian Statham, Matthew Hoggard, Alec Bedser and Andy Caddick. Statham loved to say, if you miss, I hit, and he didn't like bowling bounces. Hoggard was a proper swing bowler, maybe one of the last we'll ever see. Bedser bowled cutters and Caddick relied a lot on his height. All of these were good. None of these were out and out fast. But then you have Darren Goff, a proper quick with a low arm action. When Steve Harmison got it right, he destroyed worlds with his pace and bounce. His mate Freddie Flintoff could also go well over 90 miles an hour when needed. And Jon Snow, well, he was the speed bowling poet. So if you're playing along at home, that's 6 English bowlers with more than 200 wickets being considered pretty much fast. And this is over the entire history of the sport, where they've had to find some of these blokes in mines, or occasionally phone someone up north and ask them if they own bowling boots. That's not what the system is now. England has this incredible professionalism, keeping guys out of the county system, using their A teams, making sure none of their quicks get over bowled, and the best when it comes to sports science for cricket. Dietitians, biomechanists, physios, body imaging software, and everything else they need to make sure that they have as many fast bowlers available to them. All that money and planning and effort, and from that they have Josh Tongue and Saqib Mahmood, Ollie Stone, Jofra Archer, and Mark Wood. And yet, not one of them is fit enough or talented enough to push their normal bowlers out of the team. So they end up in a test match when they need to make something happen on a flat surface that they ordered. And so Stuart Broad and Ollie Robinson have to bowl intimidation bowling. And part of this is because, if my Ben Stokes bowling doomsday clock is right, we don't have that many deliveries left from him. And in the first innings, he was bowling around 80 miles an hour anyway. He does have like 800 balls left to bowl in international cricket. That's probably only 500 if he has to bowl a couple of fast short bowling spells within them. And so no one thinks of fast bowling in Ollie Robertson at the same time. Even Stuart Broad, who has had periods of speed early in his career, is not really an ideal option for the short bowling tactic, as Jasprit Bumrah might have once shown at this ground. And it gets worse for them because under this Bazball reign, the short bowling option seems to be their plan B or C, and sometimes D through to Z. It was like Coach Brendan McCullum was fully converted through all those years of watching Neil Wagner do this for New Zealand. Not to mention that when fit, Stokes will deliver as many bounces as he can until he's running in on bloody stumps. And to show the difference of the pace between the two teams in this match, you have the English bowlers at an almost first-class level of 80 miles per hour. The Australian quicks, who certainly haven't been at their fastest, especially with Boland over Stark, are still way faster. Yet, for everything I've just said, England got their last 4 wickets with a Yorker and 3 short balls. The Usman Khawaja dismissal was a masterclass in using smart bowlers on a flat pitch. Stokes went with the full Yorkshire wall, and this was after Robertson was using slower cutters around the wicket. Apparently having 5 players from mid-wicket to cover wasn't enough for Stokes, so he actually added another one just before this delivery. This seemed to put Khawaja off for a little bit, and he tried to come down the wicket and then squeeze the ball away square, only to get bowled. Considering the pace of this bowling, Robertson actually made a pretty good explosion on these stumps. But it was the smarts and the skills that won them this wicket. And it was this dismissal that was the difference between them starting the innings a long way behind or somewhere near par. And of course, it was when they got this dismissal that they went even more towards the short ball, although they'd certainly bowled it early in the session and also quite a bit to Travis Head. But this was different because now the tail was in and it was a very slow wicket at this point. It was hard to get away and you couldn't duck it. Not too many edges were going to fly away for 4 or 6. This is why Broad could hit Pat Cummins with a 78 mile per hour bouncer. And because of the lack of pace from the bowlers and the pitch, it meant that you either hit the ball for 6 from the middle of your bat, or your miss it probably went nowhere at all. Nathan Lyon had already swung at some short ball with his edges limping out to kind of nowhere. And he was only ever going to last so long playing the way that he did. Scott Boland went for defense with a short leg and a silly point so close that they could smell his mood. His shot was mostly just because he couldn't get out of the way of this delivery. Without a frosty hook shot, that was only going to last him so long. The only other choice he really had was to take a few balls on the body, as Cummins had. But it was his captain who went for a big 6, activating his KKR or Sydney Thunder power. But after one big shot, he was out soon after playing another one. And England had wrapped up the Australian tail with Yorkers and bouncers, despite having no actual pace bowling at all. Of course, some of this does come from the fact that Australia has the worst tail in this era since, 1991, when Craig McDermott and Merv Hughes regularly batted together at number 8 and number 9. But the real question is, can England do this on all the flat pitches that they've already ordered for the rest of the summer? I mean, Ollie Robertson was treated today like he bowls 14 or 15 miles per hour quicker than he actually does. Stuart Broad was also in enforcer mode in what should be the armchair period of his career. And how long can Ben Stokes sit back and watch 2 men yards slower than him before he decides he's going to have to try it himself? And even the thought of using Jimmy Anderson this way should wake up any English fans at 2 AM drowning in their own anxiety juice. England have just decided that skill is their most important weapon, and they are picking their best bowlers, and today they found a way to make that work. To win the series, they're going to have to work out how to do that at least another 5 and probably more times. The main part of Bazball's success was not the attacking, it was making the most out of what you actually did well. You could argue in the days of Ken Higgs, England would actually discard that kind of bowler, looking for someone who was faster or more complete. Now, they try and get the most out of all of their talent. And today, England kept Australia's total in check with Jimmy Anderson being himself, Ben Stokes being a facsimile of himself, and 2 taller bowlers bouncing the crap out of Australia at 78 miles per hour. It's not what Higgs would have done, but it worked.